So thanks again for joining tonight's webinar. I just wanted to give a quick introduction to the Peace River Forge Association of BC, who's kind of happy and grateful to be leading this project. And our mandate and mission is to support and foster the forage industry through meaningful information sharing, research collaboration, applied field demonstrations, and membership network building. And we hope to do some of that tonight as we get into our fire webinar number 1 on the ruralization of wildland fire in the Pyrocene. I'll hand it over to my co-host, Sonja Leverkus.
Thanks, Nadia, and welcome everybody. Nadia and I are really thrilled to be speaking to you today from Northeast BC, where we share the lands with Treaty 8 and these traditional territories that we enjoy living on and working in and amongst, along with lands that are important to Kaska, Métis communities, and other Indigenous peoples. We are really honored to share this work today and share the work that we all do across these lands that are important for all of us.
The agenda we have prepared for you tonight includes a brief introduction of both Sonja and myself, the vision of this program that we are kind of working towards, the humans involved, the gear involved, and how it may lead to ruralization of wildland fire, the research that we're working on, some products that we're working on, some recognition that we've received, a brief video, a call to action for you, and a Q&A at the end. So my name is Nadia Mori. I grew up on a small mixed farm in Switzerland. You can see me there milking my cow, Valerie. And then I moved to Canada. I did my Master's of Science at the University of Saskatchewan in rangeland management, looking at the grazing and fire interaction in native rangeland. Now I work as a contract agrologist in the Peace region, and my two main engagements are being the coordinator for the Peace River Forage Association of BC, where I have the pleasure to support the forage and livestock industry through various demonstration projects and a lot of knowledge extension that we do. I'm also the extension coordinator for the Peace Region Living Lab, which is a 5-year collaboration with producers, scientists, and researchers and various stakeholders, and a big collaboration with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. I also have a 4-year degree in acting, and I lend my voice acting skills to a small media production company here in the Peace region called Fast Field Productions. And in all my spare time left after that, I'm also a small scale producer. I grow microgreens that I sell to the local communities to help with food security.
Thanks, everybody, and really big thank you to Nadia for bringing us all together tonight in the Peace River Forage Association. My name is Sonja Leverkus, for those who don't know me yet. I grew up ranching first in southern Alberta and then in the East Kootenays, where every day we spent on the land. I am a professional agrologist, registered professional biologist, registered professional forester, and a Canadian recognized environmental practitioner. I'm also certified with the Association for Fire Ecology as a wildland fire professional and a fire ecologist. I hold a PhD in fire and range management and ecology from Oklahoma State. And I own two companies, two primary companies, Shifting Mosaics Corporation, an ecological consulting company, and Northern Fireworks, which is a specialized wildland fire company. I have been an adjunct professor at the University of Alberta since 2018, and I'm currently an adjunct professor at Thompson Rivers University Wildfire Center. Fire has always been a part of my life, ironically. It's interesting how things take a turn. Full circle, this was in 1985 in the East Kootenays, where we had a very large wildfire on our range tenure, and that's my mom in the right-hand corner riding and gathering up cows. You can see in the background of this photo a mosaic created by a fire on the mountain range behind. Our ranch, the Elkhorn Ranch, was actually the base camp of operations for the firefighters that summer, so in 1985. And it's been pretty interesting to meet and work with some of the firefighters that in 1985 were on our ranch at the base camp, and then to work on fires with them in my professional career. I'm really thankful to the mentorship from those folks across Northeast British Columbia, in particular, the guide outfitters, the cattlemen, First Nations and Indigenous communities, and the scientists who I've had the fortune to meet along the way. I believe that mentorship comes in all different forms, and that having my hands on fire and in the fire is really, really important. Not only are my hands in the fire, often in the black, we also run a Type 3 wildland fire crew, but fire is constantly on my mind and in my heart. Nadia and I wanted to make sure we shared our vision of what wildland fire looks like from here moving forward across our region in Northeast British Columbia. That's about 19 million hectares. Across this landscape, we know it's a pyrogenic landscape, so a landscape born of fire. This outline in the black and white map that you can see on your screen is Northeast BC, so that's region 7B, the Peace region. And this shows the fire history since 1922. So while this encompasses Dawson Creek, Fort St. John, Hudson's Hope, all the way up to Fort Nelson and out towards the Kachika to the west. So it's a broad landscape. We do see that there was a lot of fire. And this was actually only 10 years ago. So I should definitely update this map. We know that in this area, especially over the last few years, we've had historic evacuations. So not only do we have historical fire across the landscape, wildfire and prescribed fire, but we also have had historic evacuation alerts. The largest evacuation alert in the history of British Columbia was last year around Fort Nelson, last year being 2023. And what we also see from this increased amount of wildfire is the increase of smoke and the potential impacts that has on human health. In Fort Nelson, we were often well above the healthy air quality that folks should be outside. As many folks, I think, on this call will remember from 2023. So on May 3rd, 2023, that was quite a historic day for many of us in the Northeast. At around 2:10, we started to see landscape fires picking up, and 2:10 and after that as well. And we call our slideshow that we're ruralizing wildland fire in the Pyrocene. The Pyrocene is a term that's used to describe the domination of Earth by fire. So it's a time in Earth's history that is dominated by fire. That's the Pyrocene. And living in this time in the Pyrocene means living with fire, as many of you on this call know, I am sure. What we also know, especially living in the boreal forest ecosystem and in northern British Columbia, northern Canada, our fire season is stretching out at both ends of the year. So we're getting bigger fire earlier in the year and later in the year. This is an example. So we went from May 2023 and then September 22nd, 2023, which was another historic day for us here in Northeast British Columbia. This is a satellite image from the RAM satellite, and you can see all of these fires all across our area here, taking off the triangles or the centers, the points of the triangles or the centers of the fire, and then you can see this was a day that there was more than likely wind from the south blowing to our friends and neighbors in the Northwest Territories. This was a really historic day for us in Fort Nelson. We had just spent the summer fighting fire, and my crew was out on the fire line, and they came back in, and this is what it looked like on the ground just coming in off the Sierra Yo-Yo de Sound Road that day. That was September 2023, and here in May, which 9th, 2024, which actually feels like it was yesterday, but we're coming up, encroaching the 1-year anniversary. This was the first cumulonimbus cloud documented in Canada in 2024. Dr. Mike Flanagan posted this photo on his Twitter, and we had a lot of feedback about it because it was the first of many cumulonimbus and pyrocumulonimbus clouds. So pyrocumulonimbus is clouds that are driven and developed because of the fire underneath them. Just to put it in scope, this is just beside the Quest hangar here at the Fort Nelson Airport. And you can see inside the yellow circle, the search and rescue members just inside the yellow circle. So you can see how large that cloud is, just in fairly close proximity to Fort Nelson to the east, probably more than about 40 kilometers away though. 24 hours later, this is what we saw. This is on the Alaska Highway on May 10th, a day that will forever be etched into the history of Fort Nelson and definitely into my brain. This is what it looked like facing westward beside the Fort Hotel and closing into the town office and the Husky, for those who know where that is, and one of our very few traffic lights in Fort Nelson. I live under that black cloud along with many of my crew and my family members. And so this is the Parker Lake fire that started around 1500 or 1600 on Friday, May 10th. This is what was happening as that fire was coming towards our homes and our community. And it allows us to reflect on the choices that we have in these kinds of situations. This was less than 250 meters from our operations chief's house, which is less than a couple of kilometers from my home where I'm speaking to you from today. These are embers that are coming off of that main smoke column that were landing in the right of way and in the bush, just right close to his place and other people's homes. Some of the choices that we were posed with last year, which I'm sure other folks on the call have faced these as well, is, are you ready for the ember shower? The ember shower is what happens when we have a large landscape fire coming and typically rolling into the wildland urban interface, and we see the shower of embers that are coming towards our home and our infrastructure, our fields, our livestock. So questions to be asking ourselves is, are we ready for that ember shower? And then the next question, which is a less than desirable question, but we faced it here in Fort Nelson with the evacuation order. Are you staying or are you going? Are you going to stay and defend, or are you going to leave the community? And those are questions that should be taken very, very seriously. We had that discussion on Friday, May 10th here in my driveway, and there was a few of us that stayed to defend our community and right into Monday, May 13th, when the majority of folks left, including the RCMP and the conservation officers. So the choice to stay and defend is a very serious choice, and we're happy to talk further about that, but also the choice to go is really important to be prepared for. And that's what we hope to really underscore, is being prepared. In this time of large landscape fire happening and occurring, we are often asking ourselves if we're in a new era of fire behavior. So how fires behave, how deep they dig into the ground. We know that we're going into the 4th year of drought here around Fort Nelson in particular. Last year, we were already digging really deep. This is Atlan Thiessen, who may or may not be on the webinar, or maybe some of his relatives are. We know Atlan's just about as tall as me, so he's just over 6 feet. He was digging really deep into the ground, and we were still finding heat that low into the muskeg. And so not only are we digging deep into the ground when we're fighting fire, we're also needing to dig deep within ourselves to be ready for it, to know how fire moves, to be trained in fire, and to have all of the gear necessary to be able to protect ourselves and our homes and our loved ones. We've summarized the vision for a Northeast BC wildland fire program into the following statement, so I'm just going to read this out. Our vision includes rural incident management teams with trained intermediate wildland fire leaders spanning multiple valleys and communities, such as Aitken Creek, halfway south Peace Montney, Hudson's Hope, Lorcash, up here in Fort Nelson and Toad River, and other locations, supported with gear and trained crew who also do prescribed fire and are partnered in research on fire, on the interaction between fire, grazing, soil, and carbon, and who all contribute to fire absorbent landscapes with neighbors helping neighbors and tactics and operations led by provincial and territorial response agencies such as BC Wildfire Service. What we know about humans is that there's just simply not enough humans in Canada to deal with the current and projected amount of fire. Particularly, we know that in rural and remote places, more humans are needed earlier in the season and later in the season. So we're looking at April and September into October. That also means that people are going to need to be ready to work long hours. We work half days, 12 hours is a half of 24. So people need to be ready and able and capable of working 12-hour days on fire lines if they want to be part of the firefight on the ground. In British Columbia, typically there's approximately 800 initial attack and BC Wildfire Service crew members in the summer, and then that's supported by approximately 1,500 contract crew members, like my crew here, Northern Fireworks, and we're a Type 3 crew, and there's also Type 2 crews. So something that we ask ourselves and what we need to resolve is how can the people of the North build capacity and ability to fight wildland fire?
As Sonja mentioned, the need for more trained humans is quite evident and very pressing in our rural communities. So in 2022, Sonja and I were fortunate enough to get our first bit of funding through the Beef Cattle Industry Development Fund. And we hosted two schools, one in Hudson's Hope and one in Eris. And the training provided included the S100, which is basic wildfire suppression, and S185, which is fire entrapment avoidance, and the incident command system level 100. As a package, those three courses bring you kind of at a basic level where you might also be brought on as a contractor with the BC Wildfire Services. And we felt that is important as we train our rural community members that they are at a level where now they can participate in the process that's part of BC Wildfire Service. In 2024, we were fortunate to receive some more funding, and Sonja's crew really put a tremendous amount of work in April to train 170 humans and two babies that stayed for the entire workshop. And we felt, you gotta start them young. So that's our motto there. We had one school with the West Moberly First Nation, four schools in the Buick area, and so the Buick area would be in the North Piece, and two schools in the South Piece in the Eris area. And rather than us kind of telling you how it was to attend those schools, we have a wonderful testimonial from one of the farmers and ranchers that attended that kind of summarizes the experience. It's just under 1 minute. And rather than experiencing technical difficulties, we are just sharing the link in the chat. So if you go in the chat, again, if you look at the bottom of your screen or on the side, you should have to chat. You can click there. There's a link that Sonja just pasted, and you can copy and paste that into your browser. If you have any struggle with that, we can also share it with you afterwards, and we'll give you a minute to watch this right now.
That's been a minute there, Nadia.
You bet. So if everybody would like to come back to the Zoom. So in that testimonial, you could see how this rancher had experienced the pressure of fire right around his property. And he also mentioned the importance of the hands-on training. And that's a really important component to have. It's one thing to read in a manual, these are the 7 steps to starting your water pump, and these are the directions you should point the nozzle in certain situations of a fire. But it's quite something different when you're out there and you're actually feeling how much intensity it takes to pull that ripcord on a Mark III water pump, or how you have to hang on to that water hose as the water's coming through, and how much pressure is on there. So the hands-on training is to experience what it's like, but also to take away maybe some of that fear that could be coming when dealing with wildfire or prescribed fire.
Being ready and being prepared is something that we really hope you take away from tonight. And for those of you who have been in our training sessions, we need to be ready for it. Those of us who live remote and rural, we know oftentimes that we need to be ready to protect ourselves and support our neighbors. And so this is in all wildland fire. So wildland fire being the umbrella for wildfire. So wildfires that happen in the summertime and prescribed fires. We're just transitioning into the part of our presentation where we're going to talk a little bit about prescribed fire and what that actually means. When we talk about prescribed fire, that's the application of fire on the land through the use of a prescription, and the prescription outlines treatments, specific goals, and management objectives, and how fire is the prescribed component relates to the prescription, which includes indices, timing, and parameters that must be met in order to achieve pre-established goals and objectives. Some people may be familiar with an older term called controlled burn. And so a controlled burn, and I give credit to John Weir, who is one of our global prescribed fire specialists and experts. A controlled burn is actually a fire in a metal container with a lid on it, where you can control all aspects of that, as seen in this photo. A prescribed fire is a systematically planned application of burning to meet specific management goals, such as this prescribed fire that we did, which was the first prescribed fire for an oil and gas company in Canada a number of years ago now. In order to conduct prescribed fire and to fight fire, we all need to have good gear to be able to operate safely.
So to get this gear, we again went on the hunt for some funding, and we were extremely fortunate to get support from the province of BC through the Ministry of Agriculture and Food to purchase 2 customized wildland fire structural protection units. And we call them lovingly Fire Wagon 1 and Fire Wagon 2. So here's a picture of the wildland or wildfire structural protection unit, Fire Wagon 1. And it's a 20-foot trailer, and it has everything that a firefighter's heart might desire when being out trying to fight those fires. When we look in on the back, so the ramp goes down, and you can see at the very front, there's kind of these orange piles. Those are water pumpkins. So if you're in an area where you don't have a water reservoir, these are mobile water reservoirs that you can pop up wherever you might be at. And as we move into the trailer, we see other things and tools that are needed to help fight the fire. So we got sprinklers that can go on the ground. We got sprinklers that can go on top of infrastructure, on top of rooftops. We have, of course, the all the accoutrements that are needed, such as the 3-way valves and water thieves and anything else that you might need. And of course, the all-important Mark III wildfire pumps that are standard. And just to give you a bit of a context, so to get one of these up to the Peace region with all the intake hose and the toolbox that goes with it is about $12,000 for one. And we did a lot of work to prepare these 2 units to go out. So all the materials had to be labeled, engraved, and inventoried. So it's ready to go for the spring of 2025. Now, with that, we have the gear and the training, and our people in the north are trained up and geared up. Oh, you're still muted.
And with the training and the gear, that moves us into ruralization of wildland fire. So that allows us and prepares us with training and with good gear. It also supports fire absorbent landscapes through the application of prescribed fire, with fire as an ecological process. And this also contributes to the regional strategy around time since fire. Simply put, burn it, graze it, be ready for it. And that supports this ecological interaction of fire and grazing, which is termed pyric herbivory. So that's the interaction when we burn the land and vegetation and forage and browse regrow, and livestock and wildlife and ungulates follow that fire around the landscape and graze and browse on the really nutritious and delicious products of the fire. We believe that it's common sense to empower local resources, especially in remote and rural parts of British Columbia. We also believe that it's common sense that we should be collaborating and uniting rather than dividing. If anybody's been through an evacuation, you can see that there's a lot of division that happens in those times. And I personally think it's unnecessary. And there's a lot more that we can do together to support each other in these extreme fire response times. Easy to talk about putting more fire on the land. And in our province, there's a lot of talking about prescribed fire. It is less easy to actually make it happen. It requires prescribed fire burn plan signatures and a lot of support and commitment from various folks. So we really believe in getting to walking the walk and not just talking about things, actually doing it. Our main goal is to show what can be done so that others may do it as well in a safe, effective, efficient way that's supported by the science and by local and traditional and cultural ecological knowledge. While we may be passionate about prescribed fire, we are doing this because we know it is the right thing to do across our region, across our province, across the country, and across the world. Applying fire to the land develops and creates and maintains fire absorbent landscapes. We know that there's mosaics across the land, and when we have mosaics across the land, they can absorb fire. You can take a look at the background here. This is in Burns Lake within the Tintangle fire from 2023, sorry. And you can see that there's a green rectangle on the far left side, and that's a younger plantation. And when the Tintangle fire was walking across the landscape, the fire walked right into the plantation and went right down to the ground. So this is an example of a mosaic across the landscape that can absorb fire. We know there's terms like fire sheds, and those are ways of dividing up a landscape and talking about how we're going to interact with fire, where we want fire and where we do not want fire together. Many people, I think, who are unfamiliar with fire think that we just want to burn everything all of the time. This is an example from 2009 of a prescribed fire that we did on the north side of the Liard River for wood bison. And I think it really highlights the fact that when we use aerial ignition, so we were lighting up with ping pong balls, you can see the small flames that were starting. Our goal was to open up these pockets of what was rangeland and from many generations of use of fire from the Casca people, as well as from the guide outfitters that were working on this landscape after. While we do see smoke, and we know that smoke will happen when we apply fire to the land, it's typically just one day of smoke, as opposed to several months or longer, having smoke in our face, as many of us have experienced this past summer, this past few years. This is what it looks like just the day after, or might even have been the evening after we had completed the prescribed fire. So a lot of white ash around, and still a couple smokes puffing out, but not too scary looking, and it does not look like nuclear devastation. Several months later, we went in to this area and we did vegetation um, monitoring, and we can see this beautiful flush of forbs of flowering plants and grasses that are critical for wildlife as well as for livestock, in this case horses, by the guide outfitter who was running this guide territory. I've already mentioned the term mosaic when talking about fire absorbent landscapes, and we know across broad landscapes that fire results in a shifting mosaic and a patchwork across these broad landscapes. And that patchwork occurs through space, so spatially through space and through time. And that interaction, that interplay results in what we term heterogeneity. And heterogeneity is the difference in vertical structure and distribution and composition of vegetation across the landscape. And it has been successfully argued in the scientific literature that heterogeneity is a critical root of biological diversity. It's all about time since fire, so how long it's been since an area burned, and the number of times that area has burned through space and through time.
So you can hear in Sonja's message that there are a lot of important contributions that prescribed fire can make towards biodiversity, towards the health of a landscape. But also, like Sonja said, when you see a fire, you see that smoke, and fire has kind of probably come under some scrutiny and maybe has a bit of a bad flavor attached to it because we're not really sure what's happening around, how would fire fit into climate change and what's going on with the soil carbon and how is it affecting maybe goals to sequester some carbon. And a lot of research has been done around prescribed fire, but we haven't answered that question around soil carbon yet. So we set out again to find some funding to get this research started, which we do find is very critical to know. And we were fortunate enough to get funding support from Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, the Beef Cattle Research Council, and the BC Hydro Agricultural Compensation Fund to look at three questions or kind of have a rationale with three prongs attached to it. First of all, we want to keep prescribed fire available as a tool for our ranching and farming community because they may be using it for pasture maintenance, for brush control, and just as part of managing their landscape. And then we also recognize that the indigenous peoples have been using fire on the land for thousands of years before we ever came here. And there is a strong interest in putting good fire back on the land. And then there is, of course, the potential of using fire to prevent fire. So using prescribed fire as a wildfire risk reduction tool. So as part of the research, we have 4 sites. 2 of them are in the North Piece, so the Aitken Creek and the Halfway River site. And then we have one somewhere in the middle around Hudson's Hope and one in the south with the Bear Mountain Community Pasture by Eris. And those are sites where we look at what is happening with the soil, the vegetation, and the forage. So we're looking at everything before and after the fire. So what's happening with the soil carbon, the soil microbiology, the vegetation composition, and also the quality of the forage, which should be increasing based on previous research done in this area. So out of all this research and out of all this work, we obviously also want to share materials out to you, the people on this call, and to the farming and ranching community and any other stakeholder interested in fire on the landscape. So first of all, putting good fire on the land, the actual prescribed fires that we're doing as part of this research. And then out of that also, we would like to create a checklist for ranchers because Like Sonja mentioned, those prescribed fire burn plans, they are quite daunting. And, ranchers are good at ranching, but all this paperwork is really, really hard for a person to manage. And so with the checklist, we hope to kind of reduce that administrative burden and just take away the angst of maybe trying to apply for a fire. And then there's also a lot of myths around fire. And so one of our first fact sheets will be a bit of a myth buster, what's true and what might just be a little bit of a myth that has been pushed around. We're also making a couple of videos documenting not just the project and the process, but also some outcomes and just some materials that can be shared nationally and internationally. Tonight, you're sitting on this first of 3 webinars, which is part of our fire webinar series. And we also have done a pasture walk this summer. We'll do more pasture walks down the road where you can come and actually see what it looks like a couple of months after a fire. Like Sonja mentioned, the mentorship is so important, and these tools are hard to get into unless you actually have the opportunity to walk a little bit in the mentorship role. And so we had 2 young individuals who just took the training in April and then were able to go work with Sonja on the fire line. And we hope to have more mentorship opportunities coming up. If you want to stay tuned on what's going on with this project and our findings, the Peace River Forge Association has a project website dedicated to this project, and that's where we will link up all the information and products that are coming out. We were fortunate also to receive some recognition. It took us really quite a lot of effort to get this project off the ground. Again, like Sonja says, it's easy to talk about fire, but it's hard to actually commit to it. But once we had the commitment from the gracious funders that came on board with us, we started getting some attention, and it started with the CBC reaching out for their program, What on Earth? And they did an interview with Dr. Sonja Leverkus and one of our ranchers, Jack Thiessen, right in the field, out in the middle. We didn't even have cell connectivity. Sonja had to pop up the Starlink to make it happen. And if you're interested in that, you can just go find it on the program What on Earth. It was a really well done kind of summary of our project. Following that, we received some interest from the Senate for, again, Sonja and our rancher Jack to go in as a witness in October 2024. It was a discussion around, it was right after the Jasper fires. It was discussions on, how can we maybe do better in preventing tragedies like that. And then finally, we had interest from California when CBS called us up and was interested in what's happening with fires that burn all winter. There's some fires, especially in Sonja's area up by Fort Nelson. The fires will go into the ground and smolder there all winter and then come back up in the springtime. Now, unfortunately, California was hit with their own fires, so they might not be able to come see us and document our process. But nevertheless, it was pretty humbling to receive all this attention. Now, to give you a little bit of a teaser and some more feedback from our ranchers, we have a 1.5 minute trailer. And again, Sonja has just pasted the link into the chat. So again, if you just find your chat bubble and then go there, copy and paste that link. We'll just give you 1.5 minutes to watch that, and then we'll take you back here with open arms.
We're at our time, Nadia, but we could give folks another 15 or 20 seconds.
If you had any trouble watching that video, it is also available on the Peace River Forge Association YouTube channel. Yes, we do have a YouTube channel. You can also find it all linked on our website where it automatically takes you to the YouTube channel. And if you're maybe curious, what's the Peace River Forge Association about? We also have a lovely About Us video that kind of tells us, what we do. With that, here's your call to action for you. If any of this interested you, if the trailer intrigued you, if what the testimonial was from one of our fire school attendees intrigued you, we do have an expression of interest page on our website. You can use this little QR code, or if QR codes are not your thing, you can just go to peaceforage.bc.ca, and there we are collecting names. If you're interested in a fire school, and if you put in your name there, we will notify you as soon as we have another school available. I see. And oh, sorry. I just saw that my connection was unstable. Sorry, I was going to finish on that slide, if you don't mind. And I also just wanted to say, if folks have already taken this school, we are also looking for people interested in supporting during a prescribed fire. So when we go, hopefully this spring, we have 2 more prescribed fires to implement. If you're already trained and would like some hands-on experience. And then finally, I just wanted to put in a plug. You can see this beautiful big white space on the side of the structural protection unit, where there would be a lot of space if somebody would love to promote their business as a community supporting business. As you could imagine, as we deploy these trailers, there will be some cost to cover expenses for materials lost, materials damaged, also some consumable goods that are just used up as people are out fighting fires. So if you feel this would be a worthy goal where you would like to have your business associated with, you can also reach out on this expression of interest and we will be in touch with you. So now with that, we can go to our closing slide, where once again, we want to just express a great gratitude to all our funders, both for the gear, the schools, the research project. We are extremely grateful. And I'm also very grateful to Shifting Mosaics and Northern Fireworks with Dr. Sonja Leverkus and all of her team.
Thank you so much, Nadia, for that. And we are very thankful to work with yourself and Peace River Forage Association and many of the members who are online today. And we'll give Dr. Jillian Baynard a shout out. I think she might be in the audience as well, from Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. So there she is. Big shout out to one of our research partners, Dr. Baynard. And big masicho, Joe Asanala, to all of you for spending time with us. And we look forward to seeing you on the fire line in a good way. And I think, Nadia, we are open to having some questions in the chat. And maybe would you like me to help facilitate that?
You bet. Yeah, we can both look at the chat. Right now, we don't have any questions, or if people feel comfortable, they can also open up their line and ask us their question in person. We're a small enough group that we can have a bit of a Q&A here.
Or if Dr. Baynard would like to say anything, now would be a good time if she's interested or has a moment. Put her on the spot.
Oh, I have nothing particular to say except just excited to be part of this project, and it's so nice to see the word getting out about the important work you guys are doing in the north. So thanks for spearheading this.
Awesome. Thanks, Jillian. Well, we could pick on some members of the audience. I see that John Betts is on the call, and we would welcome any questions that John Betts might have if he's online. Put you on the spot. Sorry, John.
Here you see. singling me out. Sonja, that was fascinating. Sorry, a bit late to attend. Uh, Thinking a lot about 2025 fire season. Live in the Kootenai system. I look to replicate the kind of ruralization fire you're putting it. I think that's significant development. To just say how with, I think there's a law of good examples that drive change. We go through, they do a lot of reports, and as you've said and remarked, otherwise, there's a lot of talking. But when people are actually out doing on the ground and setting good examples, is I think we have. So my overall comment work, and I look forward to more about your work up north, ways that we can replicate this, the huge variety of ecosystems that we're all successfully in this climate change.
Thanks for allowing me to put you on the spot there, John. You were a little bit broken, but I think that we did hear what you shared, and really appreciate your participation with the Western Forestry Contractors Association too. Nadia, was there a question that I just might have missed in the chat?
It was just an expression of thanks for sharing of the information and that there's interest in learning about what's happening to the soil health changes after prescribed fire, as are we, as are we. Yeah, I think we had a webinar on Tuesday, and I think one of the questions that came up was how we could do better at collaborating with each other, and I think part of the answer, I don't know, part of the answer from my point of view was that by demonstrating things and demonstrating safe fire, that it just sets good examples that hopefully inspires others to follow and also allows ranchers to come and see a good fire, see a safe fire that's within the parameters that we set out. I remember in spring 2024, we had very challenging conditions. We were already under a fire ban, and Sonja and her team, we had full permission to go ahead with a fire, and it was implemented absolutely safely. There was no overachievement, and we had all the safeties in place. And at the very same day, a wildfire got started. So it is possible to do fire safely if you know what you're doing. So, and that's what we're hoping to share as well, just more knowledge on how to do it safely.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Nadia. And on that token, I'll just paste for everybody the link to the Peace River Forage Association in case you didn't catch that QR code. And that's where you can go and sign up for express your interest for taking our S100, S185, ICS 100, our basic fire suppression training this spring. So check that out. And we'll be offering, I think, as Nadia mentioned, an intermediate wildland fire course for the development of rural incident command across incident commanders across the region. And Nadia, maybe one more discussion you could bring forward about the next webinar. Do we want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so if this at all intrigued you, please come back on January 30th for a Lunch and Learn webinar with some pretty renowned fire scientists. When I did my master's, these were kind of the heroes I looked up to, and it's kind of really sweet to come full circle and have a panel with them. So if you're the science person or you're very interested in, the work that has already been done, and there has a lot of work been done already, please join us on January 30th for the Lunch and Learn. And if you're more of the applied side and you would love to hear from some other ranchers and land managers who have used fire, please join us on February 13th. And that will be an evening webinar as well. I think Sonja just pasted something again. There is, wherever you registered, on the website, you can go back there and there will be a registration for the January 30th and the February 13th webinar. Thank you, Son. Or Jillian pasted it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I think it's a really exciting opportunity to hear Dr. Sam Fullendorf and Dr. Dave Engel and Dr. Derek Skasta speak about prescribed fire. They all have pretty thick accents, and I'm sure everybody will be able to understand them from Texas and Oklahoma. But while they're from Texas and Oklahoma, all three of them have done research throughout the world, and we're all part of my PhD here in Northeast BC. So they not only have experience in the United States, but they are also very knowledgeable about Northern British Columbia too. And yeah, I would agree. Art Bailey did a ton of research and is an excellent resource, and possibly some of the books behind me here, a couple of them I think he was an author of. So yeah, thank you, Eric and Teresa. That's an excellent resource as well.
So if folks don't have more questions, I don't want to lengthen the webinar unnecessarily, and we are coming up on the hour. We are very grateful for your time, for joining us this evening. And again, we would love to see you back for webinar 2 and 3. And again, thank you to Sonja for the collaboration and the presentation of this webinar this evening.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nadia and the Peace River Forage Association.
Have a great evening, everyone.